Hello everyone, Craig from the Governance and Assurance portfolio here. Final induction package for Governance and Assurance, Environmental Management, and we are definitely on the home stretch with this one. As I mentioned earlier, we don't have a lot of environmental risk, so this is going to be a very brief presentation. Probably the most important thing we need to understand with environmental management is what is environmental harm, and when we're talking about that, taken from the legislation, there are three levels. One is a very basic low level of nuisance where sometimes environmental harm can be as simple as your radio is too noisy, so you turn it off and the nuisance is gone, the harm is done. Or situations that have an environmental impact but have a remediation value of less than $5,000. It's an interesting way that they measure environmental harm with some sort of financial value, but I think it's quite effective from a legislative point of view, because how do you quantify environmental harm? Probably the easiest way is just how much does it cost to remediate this harm. If we then move to the middle level of harm, material environmental harm, that's called, we're talking about harm that has an impact of greater than $5,000 but less than $50,000, and then serious environmental harm is a value of greater than $50,000. There are a couple of other circumstances. If you're doing works in national parks and so forth, and you cause harm, the value figure doesn't really matter, but we won't get into that sort of detail here. Basically, as I say, there's three levels of environmental harm that you need to be aware of: environmental nuisance, material environmental harm, $5,000 to $50,000, and serious environmental harm. Looking at our risk profile in Hartecs itself, it's fairly basic. So first of all, I might just talk about risk in that risk of environmental harm relates to your potential impact on the natural environment. So can you affect the water quality, the biodiversity, land contamination, or cause land degradation, those types of impacts. And as you can imagine, the type of work that Hartecs do, we don't have a great deal of direct involvement with the natural environment. So our environmental aspects, what they're called, are relatively low. We're somewhat removed to risk compared to, say, for instance, a principal contractor who is using land clearing equipment and excavating next to waterways and putting in drainage systems and so forth. So our risk compared to principal contractors and our clients is significantly low. Operational personnel in particular who are on construction sites, you'll need to appreciate environmental harm and environmental risk, but as I say, you're sort of somewhat removed because you're not the principal contractor or the client. You're more an administrative or an engineering role. Looking at this diagram here, where I've sort of looked at, well, what is the Hartecs risk profile? Right at the bottom end of the scale, office waste and so forth, we can potentially, we've got potential environmental issues there with recycling and waste management, but in this day and age, nothing particularly exciting. Resource consumption, the amount of electricity, water, fuel that we consume, or whether we can be more efficient with our resource consumption, is an environmental factor, but again, I wouldn't regard it as particularly significant compared to a lot of other industries. And abuse of powers or instruction error, I'm talking here about in an operational sense when we're administering or we're giving engineering advice. The biggest risk we have is making a mistake and telling someone, oh yeah, you can just go and clear that paddock, or look, you can put those culverts down, and forget that there's other legislative provisions that we've just breached, or giving directions to a subcontractor to undertake works that turn out to be unlawful or environmentally harmful. But quite honestly, that is not likely to happen. But for those of you that are in those positions of authority on a construction site, there's a good reason for you to know a little bit more about environmental management than what this induction is delivering. Speaking of environmental legislation, then there's only a couple of little duties in the Environmental Protection Act that we need to be aware of in our business in a general sense. The general environmental duty requires that we minimise environmental harm. So there's an expectation on all of us in society that we will minimise environmental harm, whether you're driving a concrete truck or washing your car or throwing your lawn clippings over the back fence into the creek. There are environmental expectations there, and anyone who does something to adversely impact the environment can be charged for breaching their general environmental duty. Speaking of environmental duties, the other one is there is a duty to notify. Similar to notifiable incidents under the Work Health and Safety Act, there's a notifiable requirement under the Environmental Protection Act. If we cause material or serious environmental harm, so anything with a value of greater than $5,000 or upwards, you are required to notify the Department of Environment and Science. Internally, the issue here is this: if you see environmental harm which is associated with our activities, follow our reportable events procedures, and that will guide you along the path to notify your manager, and we'll take it from there. There are a number of codes and other pieces of legislation that apply to environmental management, but none specifically that would say, oh, that's definitely relating to Hartecs business. So we won't get carried away. But once again, the operational people, you will need to perhaps investigate your specific projects a little bit more to know what the environmental issues are around individual projects. Other than that, I don't think we need to get too excited, because, as I say, our environmental risk profile is relatively low, and it's only in those operational situations that you might be really out there interacting with the natural environment. So look, there you are. That's the end of part 4, environmental management. Really simple stuff there. We've been through the 4 presentations now. Thank you very much for your participation. Of course, if there is anything about the integrated management systems, risk management, safety, or environmental management that you think you'd like to know more about, please don't be shy. Come along and chat to me in the governance and assurance unit. Send me an email, call me, do whatever you like. Otherwise, as I've emphasized many times, please speak to your supervisors and your managers about any of this stuff. It's really important that you become actively involved in how we run and manage and support our business. And obviously, continual improvement is the game that we're in, so your feedback is always welcome. Thanks again for participating. Enjoy the rest of your induction. We'll see you soon.